Ontario inks deals with Saskatchewan and Alberta ahead of the meetings, and Mark Carney meets with the premiers today. And who still watches TV in Canada? And Trump to increase tariffs on steel and aluminum. All that and a lot more on The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. With me, Iain Burns, our managing editor, all the way there in a nation's capital. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan. Traffic flowing well. Skies are mostly blue with some scattered clouds. How are things looking there in our nation's capital?
It's very, very nice here. It's pretty much the same, I would say. Same weather, except a little bit cooler, maybe 2 degrees cooler. So can't complain.
Well, we're back. It's Monday, June 2nd. We're into June already. June 2nd, almost approaching summer there. June, what is that? June 21, 22? What's the official date? Something like that, right?
I think it might weirdly be June 20th. But yeah, 21st is the summer solstice, isn't it?
There you go. We're almost in summer. But we're going to kick it off with our national and international news. No intro today? There you go, just as I say it, eh? So if we had a bigger budget, if we could just have a sliver of CBC's budget, just a sliver of their budget, we could get that. We'd nail that.
If we could just have Rosemary Barton's lunch money, then we'd be in business, wouldn't we?
I'm not even going to go after that one, but I'll leave that one there. Do with what you will with it. But even if we could have just a small segment of their budget, you know, even their raise, if we could have their raise instead of, anyway, we'll get into it later. So Doug Ford and Daniel Smith putting out some tweets there saying they signed agreements to tear down internal trade barriers between Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and PEI. What happened to BC? Didn't make the list. Didn't make the cut. There you go. These are signed ahead of...
EB hasn't even bothered to go. He's chosen to go to Asia instead, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about his priorities, really, doesn't it?
That's a memorandum of understanding between Saskatchewan and Ontario sees both provinces mutually recognize each other's goods, workers, and investments, while a statement from Alberta's government says the MOU with Ontario aims to improve the free flow of goods and services between the two provinces. I mean, Daniel Smith and Scott Moe, very vocal, as was Doug Ford, saying that they were ready to get things moving and didn't see any barriers to doing what they're doing. So there you go. They're the first ones to do something. And he said Ford says it could unlock...
It's slow going, isn't it? That is not much. This is kind of going at a snail's pace. And it's also just fundamentally, I feel like even this headline is embarrassing to the nation of Canada. This is an embarrassing headline. Why is Saskatchewan and Ontario signing a trade deal? Like they're in the same country. Can you imagine, like, you know, like New South Wales signs trade deal with Western Australia, or Gloucestershire signs trade deal with Northumberland, doesn't it? It's just so crazy that this even needs to happen. You know, I'm as somebody that grew up outside of Canada and isn't, you know, necessarily used to this, haven't grown up on this at the teat. To look at it, it's just, this is fundamentally insane that a country's constituent provinces have to sign trade deals with each other. I mean, something has gone wrong there with Canada, I think, if that's the place that we're in.
I would agree with you there. I mean, it seems like such an unnecessary barrier in the first place that you would have to kind of get rid of.
You'd think they'd all just be knocked down, wouldn't you? And you'd think that would have happened around about, I don't know, 1867 or something like that.
I mean, it goes back to the pipelines, which makes, you know, like basically landlocks Alberta's resources, and the Liberal government actually used that against Alberta. And, you know, even Karina Gold, a Liberal MP, had said it in a tweet that we need to landlock Alberta's natural resources. So you wonder why Albertans don't trust the Liberal government.
Indeed. Well, and it's kind of like it's starting to get hot now, isn't it? This is decision time.
Yeah, this is where the rubber hits the road, because you can only kick the can down the road so far. So this is it right now. And Mark Carney is meeting with the premiers today, right now, actually, to discuss partnerships and all that kind of stuff. He's going to meet with some oil and gas executives as well. Or he already sat down with those oil and gas executives.
Yeah, that was at the weekend, yeah.
And there's a lot of talk, but I mean, until they actually sign a deal, it isn't actually intertwined with a bunch of carbon credits and all kinds of other fancy stuff. I don't know if they'll get a lot of faith from Alberta until they do something concrete.
Well, this is the thing. Danielle Smith, who's kind of in the lead here, Scott Moore's also like her assistant in many ways, isn't he? But she has been the opposite. She's been very, very clear. She said, I want C69 gone. I want a pipeline to Prince Rupert. And, you know, she's got a list. She's not hiding anything. It's very clear. And then in response, she's getting squid ink, isn't she? And there's ambiguity and uncertainty and vague words. And that's kind of just become fundamental to how this Liberal government operates, actually. And I by that I mean including the Trudeau era. And that's extended, just as an example, the use of the term deeply affordable housing. That's something that Carney uses now on the regular, something also that Trudeau used. What does that mean? And why are you using the word deeply to describe how expensive housing is? It doesn't even make sense. It's a crime against the English language, but it's also extremely vague. Just like we're going to make Canada an energy superpower in both conventional and green energy. How vague is that? You know, it's kind of like, it's like the way a lawyer speaks when they know that they want to lie, but they don't want to actually be found in contempt of court. So they invent all of these little roundabout ways of lying without actually, strictly speaking, telling a lie. But that's the clash, isn't it? And that can't go on forever. And then we've got Nikki Sharma here, who's the Deputy Premier of BC. So in David Eby's absence, she's there in Saskatoon. And she's done an interview early this morning. And she's shot down right away one of the main demands from Smith, which is the line to Prince Rupert. And she said that proposal has no proponent at this stage. So that's a reference to no oil company putting that forward. Obviously, oil companies haven't put that forward because they know that it's not possible. But let's forget that. Yeah, exactly.
Why would they invest billions of dollars?
We're going to focus on shovel-ready projects in BC that we can bring forward, which, in other words, is wind turbines, basically, that Adrian Dix has fallen in love with. So, I mean, this is right away. Supposedly, it's a new era, but you read things like that and you have to ask, like, is it? You've got Mark Carney using vague words, refusing to commit to clear language, refusing to make any promises really to Alberta. You've got BC basically saying no, and you've got Quebec, at least in the parliamentary representation in Quebec, saying absolutely not under no circumstances. So it's kind of like, what's changed? You know, is it just the same old story?
I would say even in her language there, she says we're going to commit to BC's shovel-ready projects. No talk about interprovincial trade. Instead of where Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta sign a deal, she's talking about BC focusing on their own priorities again. And Danielle Smith put out this tweet as well, and she, like you said, she says that she's focusing on this list. There's a list that needs to be accomplished, and you can only kind of, like what you're saying, hide behind vague words for so long before the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, it's like I said this last week, I think, but I think it's a perfect analogy. It's like it's almost like a romantic relationship, and politics often is. I find there's a very close link between those two phenomena. But it's almost like a romantic relationship where one person is kind of like wants it to be official. They want it to be in a relationship, and the other person's just like coming up with excuses again and again. It's like, oh, I've just got this stuff going on. Like, I've got this stuff at work, and we'll talk about it later. But like, I'm very committed to you, just not necessarily committed in the official sense. And it's kind of like, and it's not a coincidence that Carney was accused by an MP in England of being an unreliable boyfriend, wasn't he, when he was the Bank of England governor? And now we're seeing, maybe we're seeing why that is, because he's not being a very good boyfriend to Alberta right now, is he?
Well, the new energy minister, Tom Hodgson, made that rousing speech last week in Calgary. And, he said that they're going to be energy is Canada's superpower, and he vowed to support oil pipelines and that kind of stuff. But Carney still keeps Cabinet Minister Stephen Guilbeault. He's a professional environmentalist, really, who opposes fossil fuels and is basically, like his lieutenant for Quebec. So those two, I'd like to get those two in a room and see what they agree on.
But this is the way, I'm getting the impression, and certainly the articles, based on anonymous sources that we have so far, seem to confirm what I'm about to say. But I see that Carney is much more of a, let's say authoritarian, but for want of a better word. But I think he is absolutely the king, and his ministers are minions. It's not traditional Westminster-style ministerial government where the ministers are actually really powerful, and if they disagree, then that's like an enormous crisis for the government. It doesn't strike me as being that kind of government. I think it's like, what does Carney think? So, Hodgson can say what he wants, Guilbeault can say what he wants, really, but I think it comes down to King Carney at the end of the day.
Well, again, the rubber's going to have to hit the road sooner or later here, and we'll see that. But Carney has been using vague language. That's one of his tools in his toolbox, very vague language.
Yeah, and you have to ask, don't you, again, with the relationship analogy, why would somebody use vague language in that situation? It's because, 9 times out of 10, it's because they don't want a relationship with you, They don't want that pipeline relationship. So, I mean, I just can't. You have to think as well, what did he stand to lose particularly? And now when he's won the election, what does he stand to lose? It's not like he needs environmental activists in Quebec to vote for him. I'm sure they didn't vote for him anyway. So it's not like he's protecting anything anymore. It's not like there's a big deadline where he's gonna there's gonna be a vote within the party. That's already been rejected anyway. They can't even vote on his leadership. So in these circumstances, when he has nothing to lose and he still refuses to commit and he's still dodging it as much as he can, I mean, it seems to me quite obvious that that's because he doesn't want it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the two coastlines that have to agree to it, basically saying it's not going to happen. So it'd be very tough to see it happen. Dan McTeague, former Liberal MP, is calling, says, and in his tweet is a pretty strong tweet, and said this is treason. And he says this is based on the Trudeau government unlawfully halted CSIS foreign operations, endangering officers and damaging Canada's standing with allies. And then Dan Albus also tweeted out, Trudeau government officials were accused of suppressing or delaying intelligence related to foreign interference in Canadian democracy, reportedly to protect Liberal Party interests. We'll see where this one goes. Our CFR, our national media, digs into this.
Yeah, well, that would be. We do have to wait for that to be looked at, I suppose, before we can say for sure what it means. But that would be rather enormous, wouldn't it? You would think.
You would think so. And that's what I'm saying. We'll wait for our national media to dig into it. I mean, Dan Albus is an MP, and then Dan McTeague, he's definitely known for his fiery brand now as a former Liberal MP, but I'm sure both of them wouldn't have said it if there wasn't something to it. So,
well, he's now. I would say it's fair to call Dan McTeague now a Tory, basically. Isn't it? He is pretty much. He's a supporter of Poilievre. So a lot of Liberals might look at that and dismiss it and say it's partisan. But this is based on a report from an agency in the government. So it's not like they've just. This isn't just a partisan sort of smear.
They didn't make it up, that's for sure. There's a speech here from Damian Kurrick, the guy the MP that's stepping down for Pierre Poilievre to run in a by-election. We're going to play a little bit of it.
Now, Mr. Speaker, for now, as I offer my seat, I will, at the earliest opportunity, resign my seat to trigger a by-election. There is things that you stand for and believe in. Things like putting Canada first, no matter what the circumstances. Here. Things like ensuring that you are always going to put your country first when it comes to the deliberations in this place, when it comes to your actions. And Mr. Speaker, that is why I am so proud to stand with Danielle and stand with my family and offer my seat, to offer to resign my seat to Pierre Poilievre, the leader of Canada's Conservatives, because that man, I truly believe, is the right man to lead this party, to be the leader of the opposition in this Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, my belief before...
There we go. I didn't mean to get it cut off right then and there, but that's Damian Kurrick that is stepping aside for Pierre Poilievre to run in a by-election, which has now, like, what, 200 people that are going to run in there? Like, they've said they're going to have about 200 people?
Yeah. I mean, he saved himself there, didn't he? Because he nearly said, step down to give my seat to Pierre Poilievre, and then he corrected himself and said, give him the opportunity to to run. But, I mean, let's be honest, he is obviously going to win, isn't he? It would take some kind of crazy voodoo to make that not happen. It's almost certain that he's going to win, because this guy here, he won with something like 80 or 90% of the vote, didn't he? So it's almost a guarantee.
It's a safe riding for sure. You'd have to have some fancy voodoo to make that happen for the Liberals. This ostrich farm story definitely getting some international coverage now, and they're sounding like they might be moving those birds as a last resort to the United States. Dr. Oz is offered to take the birds, and Katie Pastineau, whose parents own the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood, BC, says the family is also urging the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to consider the proposals by U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy to save the ostriches for research rather than culling them.
It's so strange that this has become like a massive international story. Sometimes like I'm just left like in awe and just wondering like, what the hell? I guess it's just because it's ostriches, isn't it? That's the only, because ostriches are big and they're kind of cool. I think that is it, really. I think that's because this kind of thing happens all the time, doesn't it? With other kinds of fowl, like with chickens and whatnot.
Yeah, and the ostrich farm suffered that avian flu outbreak earlier. And this had a mutation of the virus that's not seen at the farm as is not seen elsewhere in Canada. So there you go. They're saying that they might, Kennedy and them think there might be some clues there with the birds, and the Canadian Food would rather just see them destroyed. So we shall see as that story moves along what happens with the big birds. And this is the Jasper Fire. Silence on fire preparedness. Cabinet won't say if there's any new steps in fire prevention that have been taken by Parks Canada following that disastrous 2024 blaze in Jasper. And one Alberta MP told the Commons the consequences of poor forest management were obvious. In the wake of the Jasper Fire, we learned that devastating consequences of poor forest managers that failed to clear swaths of dead forest. And that was Conservative MP Dane Lloyd, Parkland, Alberta. Experts are now sounding alarm that communities in national parks like Banff face similar threats this summer. There you go. That Jasper Fire last July 24th caused $1.2 million in insurance losses, and with a third of the town destroyed. Parks Canada acknowledged it was aware of the fire risks posed by thousands of acres of dead pine following the pine beetle infestation in Jasper Park.
The controversy drags on. This is actually pretty central, though, to a lot of the debate, not just about forest management, but also, ludicrous as it is, about climate change and how to react to climate change on a political level. Because, as usual, with any sort of natural disaster that occurs, these strange partisan vultures descend on the corpses, don't they, and start saying, this was climate change, this was climate change. Therefore, we need to tax gas. in Canada, because that's going to make a difference to global temperatures, which is obviously nonsensical, deluded thinking. But it's been used as a political tool. It's been used as ammunition, really, hasn't it? Not for people that are worried about climate change. Almost everybody's worried about climate change, but for people that are worried. Oh, sorry, for people that think that climate change can be either stopped or slowed by certain political measures that tend to be very unpopular in places like Canada. For those people, for the political ones, the partisans, it's become a very useful tool. So they've got this terrible habit now of kind of, when the fire's just been extinguished, or not even that really, when the fire's just started, they're on the ground and they're banging the drum for their political cause and for what, their political agenda, let's say, which includes things like tax policy, as if those things are related.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of like a battlefield. I feel it's almost like an ideological battlefield, Jasper.
Yeah. And that was then Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan that told reporters that the community of Jasper was a victim of climate change and seen devastating impact of climate change and the wildfires as a result of what's taking place. And they blamed, that Liberal cabinet blamed the fire in Jasper on climate change instead of poor forest management. And then in the 4 years prior to Jasper Fire, only 1,529 of the total 577,000 acres of dead pine were removed by cutting or control burns. No reason was given for that. So there you go. It's an embarrassment. Yeah.
It is an embarrassment because it was the federal government's responsibility, wasn't it? And therefore, what do you do when it's that? It's like, it was either Trump, COVID, or climate change. It wasn't my fault, lads. That's just a way for incompetent people, and has been for the last 10 years or so, isn't it? Incompetent people, when they're backed into a corner and they've made a mistake, they'll use one of those excuses now. It's just, although you can't really claim COVID nowadays, but I think a few opportunists still try to. But the point is, climate change almost certainly did have an effect on this. I mean, I don't think there are any serious studies that have, definitely proved that, but it's certainly true that summers are hotter and drier, and that has been blamed on climate change. The controversial thing is when they put the full stop after that, they say climate change, and then people like Sajjan and all the rest of these liberals and NDP and whatever, they then begin a new sentence and they say, therefore, we need the carbon tax. That's the thing that upsets people that are interested in serious good faith discussions, because that sentence, carbon tax, has nothing to do with climate change. It's completely unrelated, because there's nothing that we can do in Canada to change the temperature of the planet. It's not within our power. So, that's the dishonesty, because they're using it to push a political agenda. If they were just saying, oh, it's climate change, that sucks, then yeah, fine, nobody would really object, would they? But they say, it's climate change, therefore, here's my very long list of new taxes and new policies that I'm going to connect to that, and I'm going to force on you.
Yeah, and we got a new section here in our show, fact checking, and we're fact checking Melanie Jolie. She came out with this tweet that said Canada's economy grew by 2.2% in the first quarter, one of the strongest showings in the G7. Let's keep beating the odds by building a strong, innovative economy, creating good jobs, and attracting investment and talent. I mean, that is misleading at best. That's an annualized rate. The economy grew about 0.5% in the first quarter. And again, it was front-loaded by people buying a lot of inventory, worried about the tariffs. So there you go.
Sorry, is that still online? Is that tweet still online? Do we know?
Still there. Champagne actually tweeted the same thing. Francois, our minister, repeated. I was going to put him in there as well, but I figured we'll just start with Melanie Jolie.
So we have two options then. Either the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Industry, either they do not understand the most basic economics that somebody in high school would understand, or they're liars. Which is it? There's only two options there.
I was generous with misleading.
This isn't just like fiddling around a little bit like, oh, that's a cheeky interpretation. This is outright false. Canada's economy grew by 2.2%. That's a lie. That's a complete lie.
in the first quarter.
Like, if they'd used lawyer speak and said Canada's economy was on track to grow by 2.2,
Annualized. They just need the word annualized.
Okay.
They just put the word annualized in there, and it's fine. Because they just deleted that word.
Outright falsehood. Yeah. That is, and again, I have to say, if I hear the Liberal Party, if I hear anybody in the Liberal Party come out and bemoan the lack of trust in politicians, the lack of faith in politicians again, I think my head is going to explode, because they, just like all other politicians, just like all political parties, they lie again and again and again. Every time they open their mouths, they lie. But they're the only ones that complain about misinformation and loss of faith in institutions. Why do you think people are losing faith in institutions? Because you lie about the most basic things. And this isn't any sort of fancy trick that she's pulling off here. This is just like a straightforward lie that, like I say, a child could see through that lie.
So if you go and pull up Francois, maybe we can get the Fox to put it up there. If you let's see if you can grab that there. I just put up Francois Philippe Champagne's tweet that's there too. It's embarrassing, actually, right? That they either think the Canadian public is that stupid, or perhaps they are that stupid.
And I see this, I don't know where you got this copy from that we have from an economist at the Royal Bank of Canada, but, oh, okay, no, that's not related to her tweet. Okay, I thought that was actually directly related to her tweet.
No.
But, no, this is outrageous. It's completely outrageous. I mean, I don't know if we have to explain to people. I don't think we do. You already have, but this is a projection. This is like this is annualized. This is like throwing a paper airplane and then freezing time when it's like a foot away from your hand, and then saying, okay, it's going to fly this high and then it's going to land there. You have no idea that's what's going to happen. You don't know anything. It's just a complete guess to say 2.2%. It's fantasy.
Yeah, and it's an annualized thing, and most of that jump was related to people buying inventory, and that was a surge in machinery investment, 22% jump, that likely won't be sustained. So again, it's even if you could argue that they were dumb enough to put that out there without putting the word annualized in there, they're also misleading people, because there's a reason that it jumped. That 0.5 is because of the people were front loading. And so you're going to pay the piper later for that. Like that needs to be explained. So they're not being honest, 100% not being honest, right? And the Bank of Canada decision is up in the air because of this GDP number, supposedly, right? They're saying that they might not drop rates, but I mean, there's enough information out there that shows that the Canadian economy is in big trouble, and I don't think they have much choice but to drop rates. But and then that goes with the steel industry. So. Yeah, the steel industry. Trump coming out this weekend saying that he's actually increasing the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% on June 4th, and that has actually got a lot of. That's a big hurdle here in Canada, right? So like Algoma Steel already paid about $10 million in tariffs in the last 2 weeks, but doubling those tariffs would really be tough. But on the other side of that, steel companies in the United States jumped on that news. Major steel stocks jumped Monday on the tariff. There's winners and losers and all this stuff, but hopefully they can find some sanity here. But I think the first thing that our Minister of the Economy and the Finance Minister start being honest with Canadians. Stop gaslighting, because you're just kicking the can down the road.
Indeed. Melanie Jolie, though, who, as we can see, has an absolutely amazing grasp of economics. She said this morning that she's going to prioritize Canadian steel or she's going to commit to prioritizing Canadian steel for defense projects and infrastructure projects. But like I say, I mean, I'm just a complete, I'm like a dribbling moron that doesn't understand anything about the world. And I just, I bow down to her superior knowledge. But, to me, I think when Canada has an export-driven aluminium industry and steel industry and not a very big market, I'm not sure that that's going to make up for the losses. But like I said, Jolie is, she's way too smart for me.
Where they could use, You know where they could use a lot of steel and aluminum? Pipeline.
But even then, I don't think that would make up for. I don't think that would make up for the lot, because they're talking about now 50%. They're saying now that that's like RIP. That's dead now. Yeah, that's a rate at which it's just not possible to absorb the losses. Therefore, Canada's going to be left with all this excess steel, and Canada is a country of 40 million people. It's not the sort of country that can consume enormous amounts of steel, even if you're building big projects. But
you'd have to build a couple pipelines.
Like I said, Jolie's the genius here, not me.
You'd have to build a couple pipelines, and the other one would be to drop the EV tariffs, because we won't have an auto industry that'll be using steel and aluminum either, because if they don't drop those EV mandates, they will have no auto sector to protect. But here we go in Quebec. They get to make all the rules they want. There you go. Controversial store sign rules come into effect in Quebec despite repeated protestations from business. Controversial new language rules have now come into effect in Quebec. From now on, stores with English names, for example, Canadian Tire, Second Cup, Best Buy, must prominently display descriptive French terms on their storefronts. Businesses that violate the rules could be fined as much as $90,000 a day. That's how you generate revenue.
That's also how you guarantee business investment, isn't it? Because there's no shortage of American and British and all the rest of it companies that want to invest in Quebec, so that they can have they can be called something like Microsoft or whatever, or Bulk Barn, and then they have to translate that into French, even though it's not the name of the company, and put that in more prominent letters. So I guess Bulk Barn has to say, like, chocolate raisins that you can put in a bag and weigh, and that has to be like larger than the word Bulk Barn. This is just demented, to be honest. And the fact that this just is allowed to just go on unchecked. The federal government does nothing. CBC obviously does nothing. They don't care. There is no kind of national discussion about this. But this is completely insane. And they've
also just said that Quebec is no longer a cultural. They want people to learn the culture and the language if you want to live in Quebec.
But the other thing, I mean, what is never discussed, and as a consequence of our garbage media that we have in Canada, the national media, and because certain public institutions are so low grade in this country, and the debate just doesn't happen. Something that hasn't been discussed outside of Montreal is that Montreal, has an awful lot of English speakers and a really ancient now, or centuries old English language history and tradition and culture, and that's just being cleansed away. That's just being the acid burned off the face of Montreal, and it's this is like a war. This is like a real culture war, not like the stupid nonsense that gets called culture wars nowadays. This is like a real culture war. This is about in many ways it's about the future of Montreal, and it's all about Montreal. This really, the other parts of Quebec, they all speak French anyway. They're not multilingual, but Montreal is, and anyone that's been to Montreal knows that there's loads of English, and they're very comfortable speaking English. And there are lots of people who are of Irish origin or British origin, or lots of Jews from Europe who they speak English as their first language, and they're just being booted out of Quebec basically, or their culture is. This is the kind of thing that the UN would get excited about if it was happening in some random part of Asia or Africa or something. They'd be in there and they'd be saying, "Oh no, this is you're destroying an old culture here and linguistic traditions." But because it's in Canada, everybody turns a blind eye. But this is a big deal. But who cares? I guess.
You're speaking of garbage media, and here you go, taking out the trash. Most TV viewers are now over 65 years old, and this is a Holly Dome Blacklock story, and typical TV viewers are senior citizens. Imagine that. Says new CRTC research. The demographic profile of TV audience follows repeated warnings that television is in steep decline. I would say that's no Sherlock. I haven't had cable forever. Who keeps paying for that? To watch television right now, and the amount of commercials that come on to watch 20 minutes of programming and like 12 minutes of advertising, and there's no content, and it takes you, like, you have to have almost like a PhD to kind of figure out where the stations are. I don't know. The typical subscriber to cable, satellite, or internet TV is most likely 65 and over, and probably because they don't know how to cancel it. In fact, the likelihood of subscribing to a TV service increases with age from 32% to 18 to 30, to 85% for 65 years and older. Total revenue in the Canadian broadcasting sector has been in a downward trajectory, wrote these consultants. The steepest decline has been in private conventional television segment, which has relied almost exclusively on advertising sales to generate its revenue. Bell Media, operator of CTV network, in a 2022 submission to the Senate Transport and Communications Committee, said its local stations had not turned a profit in years. In fact, local private television has been unprofitable every year since 2013, yet the government continues to fund it and selectively fund some. Chorus Entertainment, operator of the Global Network, announced in 2022 was on the brink. Just go look at their stock chart. You want to see what brink looks like. The forecast came despite, get this, $103 million in pandemic relief payments to TV networks, and they're still getting money though. And they say their ability to provide local fact-based news in large parts of the country, in small markets and places like Kelowna, for that matter, is at risk. And we're going to talk about the Online News Act here, and then we're going to segue right into it. The Online News Act continues to suppress free and independent media in Canada. Like, listen to these guys. They all want more money from the government, more money from the government, more money from the government. The audience continues to shrink. People don't even want what they say. There's lack of trust in media. How many times has the media lied to Canadians and Americans? If you look at the fallout that's happening in the U.S., like MSNBC lost 43% of their audience just recently over their continued gaslighting of Americans, and that happens here in Canada. Like we just talked about, Rosemary Barton, basically talking about misinformation and then spewing misinformation at the same time she was talking about how independent media is the spreaders of misinformation.
But like, this is the thing. People have been asking that question for a while now, particularly since Trump came on the scene and the media in the US lost all pretensions. It stopped trying to pretend even that it was neutral, and it just completely opened up to the world and showed that it supported the Democratic Party, which was already understood. It was already tacitly known. But with Trump, they just dropped all that, and they were just like, out and out, please vote for the Democratic Party. Trump, we hate Trump. And then they invented all kinds of crazy lies about Trump and really spread a lot of disinformation, specifically about Donald Trump. And then that's happened in Canada as well, in favor of the Liberal Party. And lots of people, especially younger people, they ask the question, like, who the hell is watching this? Like, who is this for? This is so obvious. Like, this is such trash, and it's so partisan. It's so transparently garbage. Like, why are they even wasting money on the lights and the cameras to broadcast such trash? But here's the answer. It's because it's people 65 and older who are an extremely important demographic when it comes to elections. They have a lot of votes, and they vote really consistently. And they have a lot of residual trust for institutions like CNN and the CBC and BBC. All these institutions that younger people have almost completely stopped trusting because they know that they're tendentious, they know they're partisan. But the older people, our precious boomers, they maybe haven't got the memo that these institutions have degraded themselves. So they're kind of like saying, oh, gee, like, Donald Trump really is a Nazi. Like, I'm definitely going to have to vote for Biden this time. And if you think of it in that way, it works, because for Biden, for Kamala, and for Mark Carney, the older demographic comes out for the party that's endorsed by the mainstream media, which is usually the left Liberal candidate. So it works. Carney won this election, or the Liberals won this election, because of this demographic. And this is the demographic that watches CBC and CTV. So if you ever find yourself wondering, like, you watch Rosemary Barton spreading misinformation and just being a disgrace to the profession of journalism, and you think, like, who the hell is this for? Like, why are they wasting their time? That's the answer. It actually matters. It really does matter.
Jake Tapper, one of the, I'd say the lead anchors on CNN came out and said that, obviously he's making money off his book now, that conservative media, Fox News, got it right. Mainstream media, the legacy media, got it wrong. And that Trump was right almost about everything. And that there was lawfare waged against him. And with Letitia James and Bragg. And it puts media in the United States in jeopardy. I mean, they've clearly, a lot of them, Stephen A. Smith, a lot of the people on the left, including Bill Maher, have come out and recognized that the mainstream media in the United States has become nothing but like shills for information. And I would say the same thing here in Canada for the national media outlets. So if you look at the coverage during COVID, look at the coverage. Look at the coverage during this election. It's shameful at best. And the Online News Act, like why do the Liberal government, why don't they repeal it? Poilievre said he was going to repeal it. Even Stephen Fear, the new Liberal MP here for Kelowna, said that it needs to be repealed. Yet it's still there. They don't do anything about it.
Yeah, well, maybe they would say it's not a priority or something like that, that kind of would be understandable. But then there are lots of other things being done that don't seem necessarily like priorities. So
well, they know
it's only so far that excuse will take you.
They know the consequences of what they're doing. They're choking off media in Canada, and they're spending. You've done the story. They spent over $7 million with Facebook, and I'm sure they're spending more with Meta now. When they said that the Meta was the evil giant, or they implied that that they were going to stand against Meta and boycott it until the bitter end, and they're not boycotting it. They're spending money with it.
Indeed, but I mean, people are so partisan now that I feel like they're just not listening. It's like they have the ability to close their ears, don't they? So when they're presented with that example of hypocrisy on the part of the Liberals on this occasion, if they're generally Liberal supporters, they don't listen. It doesn't enter their heads. It's just like, next subject. Like, have you seen what Poilievre said today? Something, And then the same is true on the other side. Obviously, it's not just a Liberal thing.
Royal Bank, talking about that, says they're seeing rising mortgage delinquencies, with the GTA leading the way. Obviously, that condo market. No, you're ahead too far there. Nope. You lost it. That's okay. RBC is starting to see more signs of stress in the mortgage book as high interest rates continue to weigh on borrowers. The GTA is definitely, and Vancouver, they're starting to see some real stress there with mortgages, and that's one of the reasons I think the bank has Bank of Canada has no choice but to cut. There's going to be so many delinquencies. There's a lot of mortgages come up for renewal, and they're going to renew at a much higher rate than they were taken out originally at. And most Canadians, the majority of Canadians are $200 from not being able to meet their monthly obligations. So, a $1,000 increase in their mortgage would just be devastating to them.
And that's likely what it would be. So the size of these mortgages that people have. I mean, you mentioned Vancouver. I know people in Vancouver that have like the bottom half of a small house, and it's like $1 million. And that's not exactly like the best bit of Vancouver. That's just like the random suburbs of Vancouver. So if you think about a scenario like that, that is a huge amount of money to be added to your mortgage if you have to get a new rate, especially if you got it during COVID, as so many people did. So, I mean, it's not just hypothetical, that is it? That's a real disaster that is about to happen for many people.
A regular viewer, Iain, another Iain, says that the government hasn't done much other than, sign some paperwork every now and then. And that's it. Where's the beef? And this is the pipeline thing. Where's the beef? Where's actually some signed deals? Where's some big deals? I don't see anything yet. I've yet to see it. You?
No, I mean, I'm trying to be as generous as possible and think of something. I mean, in terms of like concrete action, you could say the carbon tax was, the consumer side of the carbon tax is no longer being collected. That is kind of that's had a material effect on people's lives, hasn't it? But other than that, struggle to think of anything.
The son of the woman who helped pave the way for assisted dying reveals intention to die by assisted dying, and it's a man. He said that he's going to end his life this summer. Kelowna resident Price Carter, 68, said he's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, but has it eased with dying the same way his mother, Kay Carter, did in Switzerland. So now he can do it in Canada here. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's just something that comes with age, perhaps, but he seems to be very at ease. If you read that interview, he is very accepting of his own death, which is, for me anyway, that was the most interesting part of that article. Though it is also quite interesting that he would choose to go the same way as his mother.
So that Holocaust survivor, 88, among several hurt in that Molotov cocktail terror incident that happened in Boulder, Colorado. And that Holocaust survivor is among 8 people injured after a man shouting pro-Palestinian slogans attempted to set a group of people on fire in Boulder, Colorado, according to U.S. officials. Mohammed Sabri Solomon was accused of throwing Molotov cocktails and using a flamethrower against a group of people demonstrating in support of hostages held by Islamist terror group Hamas in Gaza. And if you go watch the first coverage of that, it's just mainstream media needs to give its head a shake. It's just amazing. You know, and you remember that FBI one, the FBI director that came out when the guy plowed the car through, I think it was New Orleans there, and said that it was not a terror incident. It turns out it was. And you know, some of these things.
How many times have we seen that?
Where they're coming out and trying to cover on stuff, and then they have to backtrack it. But they already put the information out, and then to some people, the 65 and older group are definitely already fed that piece of information, and they run with that for a while, and then they end up having fights with people and stuff like that, defending it. So you have to wonder why they would do it. You'd have to wonder what's the logic. But
I just think another thing here, another set of people that should give their heads a shake, are the people that have been now for years and years relentlessly rabbiting on about how Israel is committing genocide, that is a genocidal regime, and that the IDF are like basically the equivalent of the SS, and they're going to exterminate a population of human beings. That now is a pretty mainstream opinion on the left, for want of a better word. I'm just going to say left, even though you could quibble with that term. But that's basically an ordinary thing to say now. It's like it's an uninteresting thing to say. If you're spreading that kind of sentiment out there, I mean, obviously there's going to be some particularly stupid individual that is too stupid to realize that you're just exaggerating and that you're just a partisan freak. And they're going to say, oh, right, a genocide. Well, we all know what we'd do if we had a time machine and we went back and Hitler was standing there. We would obviously kill him. We would kill the SS soldiers. Of course we would, because that's the moral, decent thing to do. That's what our sort of morality, our whole moral system is basically based on that hypothetical. And now here we have a load of people telling us that there's an extermination going on right now. There's a genocide going on right now. And that there's a gigantic concentration camp called Gaza. I mean, obviously, there are morons out there that will actually not think about that. And they'll go, all right, well, I better go and kill some Jews then. I better go kill some people that like Israel. And here we go. I think, you know, this is the first, or this isn't even the first, but this is one of many to come, I would say. Because there are people out there being told that the worst evil in the world is going on right now, and that Israel's responsible for it. I mean, that's like, it seems to me that that's obvious that that's going to make people go around and try and kill people. And it's definitely not the first, is it? Because there was that maniac in Washington, that was just last week, who murdered 2 Jews in a Jewish museum. Well, or is accused of doing that, let's say. You know, like, obviously this is just going to keep happening. Because, like I say, ask yourself, like, what would you do if you knew there was a genocide going on and you felt like you could do something to stop it, but it might involve you killing somebody? Would you do it? Like, I feel like most people would say yes. This argument has to be had like, if I'm not making myself clear, there is no genocide going on in Gaza. Israel's not committing a genocide. Israel's never committed a genocide, and I can say with being almost certain it will never commit a genocide, because that's not what Israel's like. It's that, just have a read. Just go to the library and read, please.
We have a clip here from Giorgia Meloni. She's a very fiery individual.
I still believe in the West, not just as a geographical space, but as a civilization born from the fusion of Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian values. A civilization built and defended over centuries through the genius, energy, and sacrifices of many.
I put that in there for you. Tied the Greeks and the Romans together, and the Western civilization and Christian values and family values.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there are a lot of people who seem to have dedicated their lives to trying to propagate the idea that the West isn't unique and that it isn't original or anything like that. But it obviously is, isn't it? And that's the basic synthesis that she just laid out there. That's the synthesis that created the West, and it is rather special. But yeah, it's seen better days, I would say, and I think she would probably agree with that.
And this one, we're going to test your reading skills here, because you're going to have to, this time, Giorgio is speaking Italian, and she goes after Emmanuel Macron, who's criticized Italy. So this is actually well worth hearing. She's a very passionate lady.
Macron. Emmanuel Macron ci ha definiti
we don't have the text there. Can't see the text like that. Can you make it bigger? There you go. Can you play it there so we can see the text? There we go.
Irresponsabili. E qui la stampa italiana a dire, hai visto che ha detto Macron, che siamo irresponsabili. Vergogna. Irresponsabile Emmanuel Macron sono quelli che hanno bombardato la Libia perché gli dava fastidio che l'Italia avesse un rapporto privilegiato in campo energetico con Gheddafi, esponendoci al caos migrazione nel quale ci troviamo. Cinici Emmanuel Macron sono i francesi che mandano la gendarmerie a rispedire indietro qualunque immigrato tenti di passare il confine a Ventimiglia. Ma soprattutto perché le cose vanno raccontate come si deve, vomitevole è chi... Buono, che lo vuoi tu? Ci hai mai tolto il pathos? Vomitevole è chi, come la Francia, continua a sfruttare l'Africa, stampando moneta per 14 nazioni africane sulle quali applica il signoraggio, facendo lavorare bambini nelle miniere, estraendo materie prime come accade in Niger, dove la Francia estrae il 30% dell'uranio che gli serve a far camminare le centrali nucleari e il 90% dei nigerini vive senza elettricità. Non ci venire a fare lezioni, Macron, perché l'Africa scappa da voi e la soluzione non è spostare gli africani in Europa, è liberare l'Africa da certi europei. Non accettiamo lezioni. Chiaro?
There you go.
That was a good ending there, wasn't it? Claro. But she might as well have just said "Vaffanculo," because that's basically what that amounted to there, wasn't it? I mean, the fact that the French ever get on their high horse about anything ever,
they've been accused
is a mystery
of
to me, really.
lots of human rights violations in Africa, for sure.
And continuing, you know, they have a kind of informal imperial influence over a lot of countries in Africa. And I mean, Italy, obviously, as well, is not in a position to say much about anything either. The Italians have done their fair share of disgraceful deeds, and in Africa as well. But I mean, the argument here that she's making is basically valid, which is that she is not getting on a high horse as an Italian leader and trying to lecture people like the French on what they should and shouldn't do. Especially that reference she made there to the Anglo-French American destruction of the Gaddafi regime in 2011, or I think it was 2011, wasn't it? Like that had a direct effect on the whole of Europe, particularly Italy, because Libya then became like a lawless state, and that's where a lot of the migrants launched from, and they went to Italian islands, and it's caused chaos for Italy. So, you know, the Italians are well within their right to be furious with Macron and with the French.
And I play this next clip because things seem to be really heating up. Well, before we go there, there seems to be lots of cracks in the EU lately, and obviously with Britain leaving a while ago, but there seems to be lots of discontent in the EU as well. But we're going to play this next clip here. This is after President Zelensky of the Ukraine launched a successful attack deep into Russian territory and took out a bunch of their long-range bombers. And then this is some of the clips that are being played and shown out there of the Russian army readying some of its missiles here. I'm just going to play this small clip because it relates to the next clip as well. And if you just play that next clip there of Keir Starmer, and that's where they're kind of like related a bit.
And today, following through on this review, I want to set out three fundamental changes that we're going to deliver. First, we are moving to warfighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready, to deliver peace through strength. Now, Britain has the finest servicemen and women in the world. We're showing them the respect that they deserve by delivering the biggest armed forces pay rise in 20 years and by pledging today that we will end the hollowing out of our armed forces. We'll build a fighting force that is more integrated, more ready, more lethal than ever, backed by a stronger strategic reserve, fully trained and ready to mobilize at any time. Second, everything we do will add to the strength of NATO. As we step up to take greater responsibility for our collective defense, the NATO alliance means something profound. That we will.
There you go.
How funny is it that Donald Trump has said more than once that Keir Starmer has like a beautiful voice? He's obviously joking. He's obviously like teasing him, isn't he? Because he has one of the worst voices of any human being on the planet. I'm sorry to say, Keir, love you, mate, but yeah, that's ambitious, isn't it? Because I mean, the British have the same sort of problems that the Canadians have in the military, that they don't pay people very much and they treat them like garbage. There are still a few like fashionable regiments in Britain, which isn't true in Canada. So there are, you know, like the sort of the gentry, the children of the gentry in England will still, some of them anyway, will still try and join like a fancy fashionable cavalry regiment or something like that for a few years before they go and work for a bank. But other than that, I mean, the military is just in a disgraceful state in England. And beyond that, to have a military in the first place, you have to have something to fight for. You know, a military isn't just something that happens randomly. It comes, it's like it's at the end of several stages, isn't it? That then you have a military, and the earliest stages in England are starting to fray and come undone now. So the question, and I would ask, is who would join the military? Who would fight for that country now? For so many reasons. So, and it almost entirely due to poor governance. So they've got terrible problems. They've got a motivation problem, and they've also got an equipment problem and a pay problem and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's just fantasy talk from Mr. Starmer.
Stark contrast when you listen to I don't see the screen here. Testing 1 2 1 2. Ian, can you hear me? You got nothing, man.
Hello.
Are we live?
Is that done?
Okay, so we're back. I don't know where we got cut off. Somehow we lost the feed, but we're back.
Keir Starmer obviously didn't like what I was saying, did he?
Yeah,
no. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to accept that.
That's right. We got cut off. We've lost half of our. We're flying a little blind as well. So, but we're back, and we're just going to head into the BC and local news here. There's a piece put out by the doctors here. Lots of Kelowna doctors now calling for reforms amidst KGH's pediatric crisis. More than 100 healthcare professionals have voiced their support for the 9 members of the Department of Obstetrics and Genealogy at the Kelowna KGH. Physicians of anesthesiology, surgery, obstetrics, gynecology released a statement Friday evening to highlight the urgent changes facing pediatric care at KGH. KGH we serve about a region of about 250,000 people. And as a primary referral hospital in Interior Health Services, covers about close to 1 million, just under 1 million people. And that press release was the views of about 130 individuals. The closure of KGH, it's back. Inpatient pediatric service from May 26th to July 4th. Potential for extension is unprecedented for a hospital this size. To our knowledge, and no comparable event has happened in British Columbia. And it says IDHA cites a national pediatrics shortage. However, Kelowna says they said that there's over 20 pediatricians with only 5 currently working at KGH. And they say that they've left or resigned because of burnout and workload challenges. There's a lot of stuff in there. I advise you to go to KelownaNow.com and read that full story. We're going to get Gavin Dew in here because he's made a comment in here. Families in Kelowna are being put at risk because the NDP government failed to act when doctors raised the alarm again and again for over a year. It's a crisis of neglect. And that's from Gavin Dew, MLA for Kelowna Mission. And the Premier and the Health Minister, Josie Osborne, can't ignore this problem any longer. It's not acceptable for women to arrive at the hospital in labor without a doctor available. It's reckless, dangerous. And like I said, we're going to get Gavin Dew in here. And we've also going to reach out to Josie Osborne and see if they'll do an interview. We just recently got a no from Brenda Bailey. We asked her to come in studio when she was here in town in Kelowna here in June. She'll be here. And they said they were too busy to come in to talk with us. And although I have interviewed Brenda Bailey in the past.
Yeah, that was in not very long before an election.
That's correct.
I'm sure that was a coincidence.
More willing to talk when it's time when they need you. But like so I said, that's what a free and independent media should have access to the politicians, and politicians should allow themselves to be held accountable. And we're sorry that we got cut off. We lost the stream. And again, if we could just have a fraction of the budget that CBC gets, even though nobody watches television anymore, it would be very helpful for us. Less for them, more for us. How's that? Less for them. We wouldn't get anything. So
just a few pennies, please.
And then we wouldn't have lost that stream. So there you go. There you go. We're back though, and we probably lost most people that we were on there with. So, but there you go. We're back, and again, sorry about that. Are we still live now? Yeah, there you go. We seem to be back. Okay. Again, that story's on Kelowna Now. You can go read that story. And this is getting worse. So a lot of healthcare professionals now speaking out, which was not the case earlier when during COVID, only a few spoke out and got punished for it. So we'll see what happens here. And we've reached out to IHA too. Not a lot of talk. They got quite a few communications people there that don't do a lot of communication. Which begs the question, why are they working in communications if they don't communicate?
Maybe that's why.
Is that
4D chess?
Tom Dias, our mayor, says he's taken action on crime in Kelowna and is starting to see some of the results. In 2025 budget, he said they committed to 1.3, this is an opinion piece that he puts on Kelowna Now, 1.3 million to fund new RCMP officers, a criminal intelligence agent, analyst, and an additional bylaw enforcement. This builds on the investments made in 2023, including addition of 23 RCMP officers, 10 bylaw, and 10 firefighters. So he says the actions are making a difference. According to the RCMP, since 2022, business break-ins are down by 55%, bike thefts dropped by 49%, overall property crime down by 17%. But there's also a study out by the Fraser Institute that shows Canada is starting to beat the places in crime like LA and stuff like that. And Kelowna seems to be on the top of those lists. So not a good,
well, there's a lot of like, there's also a lot of like asterisks that should probably be put in a lot of those stats, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, we need to look at things like, we need to look at the people that have just stopped calling the cops when something happens, you know? Like if they're attacked or something like that, or something stolen. I think people have kind of, and I should say it's not just Kelowna, this is all over Canada, and all over the West really, where people have just they've so thoroughly lost faith in the justice system and in the police and in government in general that they don't even bother to call the cops when they're a victim of a crime. So there's that to consider. But I mean, usually, like when you look at their business break-ins down 55%, that's pretty hard to that would be pretty hard to fudge those stats, because obviously a business will always call the cops, won't they? Because they need the insurance to come and pay out in most cases.
They won't get insurance coverage
so I think,
without filing a report.
And I think in this case, though, it says since 2022. So I think really maybe that's a sign of that's more of an indication of just how crazy the COVID years were for crime. And now we're starting to return maybe to a bit more of a kind of a normal patch.
Yeah. A BC man is scammed out of 20K, told by bank it's his fault. He lost close to 20 grand in a scam and has been told by the bank it's not their problem. Jordan Judge was called by a criminal masquerading as Scotiabank. His bank name appeared on his phone screen when it rang, but the Scotiabank has accused him of negligence, refused to cover his loss. Judge was subsequently reimbursed, but because of the work done by the CBC, not by the bank. So look at that, CBC doing some good work.
I was going to say, like, we've got to, like, credit where it's due. The CBC has actually done something good and useful. They investigated this, and they, for some strange reason, the money was deposited into a bank account in belonging to a university in England, like the actual university. So what CBC did was they just called up this university in England and said, look, you know, that money that you've got there is it's a result of a scam. But why did the scammer put it into that? I mean,
Well,
it's
maybe
so
they were
weird.
gonna,
It's such a
maybe
weird
they were gonna
story.
lay claim to it later. And to be fair to the CBC, there are some really good journalists that work for the CBC. Some really good ones, right?
Yeah, definitely. And they
Right.
also, they have an important role to play in doing stuff like this because they actually have time to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
But then, the annoying thing is that they're the only outlet really that does have that time and that luxury, and that's because they're funded by taxes.
Yeah. Let's move on to markets. Gold jumps on safe haven demand, obviously with the Trump tariff stuff, and then the Ukraine, Russia stuff, and I'm sure a lot of gold jumped because Keir Starmer said something there too. But we were I don't know where we got cut off, but we were talking about the state of the Canadian military being one of the wokest in the world. So. When we got cut off.
Well, we were talking. You just meant when I lost you. You just mentioned that our target is 75,000 troops or something like that, which we're not even close to meeting.
Yeah.
And what I was about to say was, like, if you think about China, China's our main enemy, but even just Russia, like to them, to the Chinese and the Russians, 75,000 troops is like they could misplace that many troops and not even realize for years. It's like, oh, that's where they are. That's where those 75,000 were. Like 60,000 people. There were 60,000 casualties on day one, the first day of the Somme battle in the First World War. 60,000 casualties. And we're talking about 75,000 troops as if that means anything.
We don't have
75,000 troops. 75,000 troops couldn't even pick up trash on the streets of Canada. That's not even enough to do that. Never mind fight a war. I mean, what a joke.
I advise people to go read that National Post opinion piece there. And just go read that, and you'll see why. Like, the Americans are getting record numbers now enrolling in their military branches. Again, they got the equipment. The equipment is a big deal. If you don't have good equipment, like, you know what I mean, you're flying 40-year-old jets. You got 4 submarines you bought at a used garage sale. You got a garage sale. You bought them from the UK. Diesel subs. How much noise does a diesel sub make compared to a nuclear sub? Even if you probably don't even have to know, you just have to use your common sense. That the diesel sub, like a truck, how noisy is it? Can a diesel truck sneak up on you?
No.
Anyway, let's move.
You need a Tesla truck for that.
Let's move on to markets. Yeah, that gold jumps on that same. Again, gold jumps on safe haven demand. Gold is, like we said, gold is looking for a catalyst. It looks like it found one, at least for a couple of days there, right? Gold right now up $86 or $84 in US dollars at 33.74. Still bouncing in that range though, but that catalyst, it seemed to find it like in Canadian dollars, 46.28 for gold, and crazy. There's the catalyst for gold in the stock market. I got kind of all jumbled up there, but the markets themselves are kind of, again, just kind of flat. Not much going on in the markets anyway, so kind of flat. Although the Nasdaq is up, and then most everything is green other than the industrials in the Dow right now. Bitcoin now looking for a catalyst. How's that? Bitcoin is still chunking around. They're holding that $100,000 mark though. Bitcoin. 104,000 in there. So there you go. The Canadian dollar, I think it's up a penny there. Look at that. Again, it's more US dollar weakness than anything. But again, talk of pipelines, talk of deals, talk. Need to sign some deals. Talk. At some point, like they said in the old Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? Where's the beef? And then this is a clip we're going to play from Hudson Bay. Sad reality in the markets like Hudson Bay, Canada's oldest retail, actually older than Canada, way older than Canada. And here's a little clip. You can take the music off, don't play the music. Just let the silence speak for itself on the Hudson Bay. And then there we got Ruby Lee here, sporting all the Hudson Bay gear there from the Olympics, Lululemon and Hudson Bay there, and she said she wants to redesign the Bold Bay stores, and she's taken over 28 of the leases held by Hudson Bay and sister Saks Company in Alberta, BC, and Ontario, and transform them into a new modern department store. There you go.
Again, talk, isn't it? Let's see what it looks like. But fingers crossed that it continues the brand.
Yeah, imagine it'll have a good connection to a lot of Chinese goods that come from overseas. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
West Texas Intermediate. We added oil into our market talk here. West Texas Intermediate crude up a little bit here. And it sounds like the OPEC is going to increase flow by like 440,000 barrels a day. So there you go. But oil trending downward. Like if you look at the overall trend, that's a year chart there. And then Western Canadian Select, a lot lower. And then we have that next chart there, but still trending down. And you can see where the premium is for, like Western Canadian Select here near the middle of this here at 48.44. Cheap. Canada sells its oil at a huge discount to almost everywhere else. Okay?
It is the cheapest, isn't it? There's no rival.
No. Cheaper.
Terrible.
Cheaper.
Even Indian basket, that's not even their oil, is it? That's Russian oil that they fiddle with to try and get around the sanctions. I mean, for God's sake. And then Mexican oil, that's heavy as well, isn't it? Usually that's like sour crude, I believe, in Mexico. So again, it's not to do with the quality of the oil, is it? It's to do with options for export.
Yeah, you want to sell it? You got somebody to sell it to? You got any other options? Oh, no, just us? There you go. Here's your price. Take it?
Yeah.
Or leave it.
Take what's in my wallet there on the bedside. It's like so disrespectful, isn't it?
And you can look to your the government of the last 10 years when they killed those two pipelines and they had no alternative markets, even though the Germans, the South Koreans, and the Japanese were there begging for it. There was, according to our friend, not only the king of the socks, now the shoes, Justin Trudeau, said there's no business case. But maybe he's joining up with Ruby Lee, and he's going to sell his socks and shoes combos, and maybe he's going to be a designer for Ruby Lee's new Hudson Bays. What do you think?
Or a mannequin, maybe.
A mannequin, there you go. Make himself useful. Let's move on to our technology section.